Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick a Mix podcast. And you will have already seen by the title slide, and I'm sure you've all clicked on it because of this, we have got Oliver Caviglioli here. And we've talked offline about making sure I get the name right. And so that's part of my anxiety gone, and we're over that hurdle. Although Oliver said that he didn't really mind what people call him, I'm sure. And for me, again, Oliver is someone I've wanted to get on the podcast for a long time, purely because I know his work, and I guess I think I know him through his work. But we bumped into each other at the Festival of Education, and I touted this idea, and he then told me some things which you would never think, which I hope we're going to talk about a little bit. Something about Olympics, something about bodybuilding. I mean, there's a lot going on, So I can't wait for this one. And just before we get started, because I'm sure we're going to get sidetracked, I've got to talk about this book. One of my passions, I guess, it's turned into it, is buying secondhand books. And almost the more random place I find the book, the more kind of special I almost feel like it is, like it was meant for me to find. And not to, I don't know how you'll feel about this, Oliver, but in my local supermarket, they've got like a book exchange. And I saw this book and I thought, no way. There's no way that Oliver Caviglioli, and this is called Mapwise for those that are looking on the video. When was that written and what was that about, Oliver?
That was 25 years ago. A little bit more.
25 years.
26 years ago. Yeah.
And how did you come to write a book like this?
Well, my father was an architect. And
Right.
I'll follow his profession. He gave me lessons in style non-stop, which was a bit of a drag. No end to it. But he always used to create logos, icons, systems for paper. So it's all that. Coming from the hippie era,
Right.
I fell in love with Tony Buzan with mind maps.
Yeah.
It was in 1972. I'm talking. I've been around a long time. And however, as I started reading more, I soon got tired with the hippie explanations. There were rules for hippiedom. One of them, you needed to do these kind of organic style wavy lines, and they're all hippie colours, and colours are really interesting. And I started thinking a bit more severely, well, are we talking about associations or categorization? Which is interesting. Is a prevalent question about schema. Schema don't exist by the way. I'm involved in something online with schema. They're a human fabrication. They're just a useful model to try and work out what's in here. Because thus far we find that neuroscience doesn't help. It's interesting, but it doesn't help. So we invent this thing called schema. You've never found any neurosurgeon who's gone into the head, cracked it open, and found some of those little trees that I draw.
Yeah, or webs or anything like that.
Utter fabrication. And interestingly, while we talk about schema, the model that we have in education is very limited. There are loads and loads of other models. Eleanor Roche's is a prototype. For example, she draws something called bird nests. So you have the most birdy cute thing called a robin in the middle. And so we think that has more bird attributes than other bigger, hefty birds that don't fly much. Even though it's nonsense. And so we tend to think that we don't have prototypes, which is a polite way of saying stereotype. We think we don't, but actually Eleanor Roche's work in many cultures around the world found that's exactly how we think. But we're too sophisticated to want to admit that. Because
I knew this was going to be
stereotypes are to do with the non-educated, and it's to do with racism, it's to do with, but actually we're like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I also started almost a bit like a Victorian amateur scientist in the field. I started reading as many books as I could. I got pre-internet, so I really was hanging around libraries a lot, finding books in engineering, architecture, design. There weren't many education. Then I came across the American ones that were just nonsense. There were like hundreds of books, American books, apart from a few that are very serious. And so I thought, this needs to be a bit more rigorously looked at.
Right.
So that was my first bash.
I love it. I knew this was going to start with a bang, and you've already shaken up my kind of thinking about schema now. That'll give me something to talk about when I get back already. Um, okay, well, let's get back onto the. I guess tell us a bit about what you're doing now for those who have been living in woods and don't know who you are or whatever, and then
Okay.
just take us way back.
Yeah. Well, currently I'm involved with a NBA, American National Basketball Association coach and a professor of movement mechanics who are both united in their love of constraints-led approach.
Right.
And they're writing a book for which I'm advising them on how to structure it and as well as
Okay.
illustrating it. And it's called Burn the Playbook.
Right.
It may be a lesson for education. So I'm not saying teachers shouldn't rehearse. I'm not saying teachers should rehearse in in limited, safe spaces. And I understand the idea that teaching is about the only profession where you learn it while you're performing.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I understand all that. However, it's worth, first of all, it's worth avoiding what seems to be an inevitable reaction in education where we personally identify with a set of beliefs and then we're loyal to them and we attack anyone that hasn't got exactly the same beliefs and we create straw men saying they live on the other end of the continuum. So
Yeah.
I'm way too old to waste any of my time doing that. However, what they're saying is this resonates. He's an NBA coach. They all have a boss with money.
Right.
So they come along and they see him very neat. He's got all his charts and diagrams, and all the basketball players are doing their drills. And he goes,
Yeah.
fantastic. And the coach is now going, actually, what I'm doing is useless, but it looks very impressive. The trouble
Yeah.
is, we're rehearsing, but there's this phenomenon that we're not dealing with called the opposition, whose aim is to bugger up and mess
Yeah.
up all our drills.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah. Yeah.
constraint-led approach means you have to have elements in it which is designed to mess up what you want to achieve. So you
Right.
have to make decisions on the spot. Obviously, you've got a repertoire, you could say, you've got a schema of
Sure.
moves, but it's not set. So that I think
No.
that's going to be some parallel that I'm foreseeing in the future after we've seen the benefits of rehearsing. And it's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with drills and rehearsing because it means you can fall back to an automaticity and all that. And it gives you
Sure.
confidence. The next stage has already been breached in a way by Adam Colbeck and Sarah Cottinghat, where we're
Yeah.
looking at, notwithstanding the training you might do, when you're in the arena, things happen so quickly, and it all depends on what you
Yeah.
notice. And of course, that brings in
Exactly.
other more interesting things. You know, I drew Willingham's simple mental
Yes.
model of learning, and I think first of all, I did the arrow from environment coming in
Okay.
because in our outdated notion of psychology that we have in education, it's outdated. We think stimuli coming in, sensory, select
Yeah.
some, working memory. But actually, for the last 20, 30 years, cognitive science has said that's not how that works. We're predictive machines. The arrow goes that way, man. It goes
Right.
that way. Yeah, we project onto the environment a model and a memory of what comes from our schema, if you
Yeah.
will, our memory, which is primarily based on survival.
Right.
So when you look at the arguments on Twitter, it's people who are wary of arguments which threaten their identity, and their
Of course. Yeah.
responses are automatic under the cloak of rational language, is automatic one based on survival of their beliefs or their identity. And because they
Yeah.
identify so strongly with the beliefs, no, and then
Yeah.
we have
That's right.
to think. And we'll link that later on with a ladder of inference.
I love that. That's fascinating already. And so, were you a teacher at any point?
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. I qualified to be a teacher in 19. I was a clever boy who really came from a very cultural background. My family is. We talk about social ascent. My family is the most socially, culturally, intellectually descending family I've ever known. So I went on in respect. I went to school to be intellectually entertained.
Right.
And all was grammar school teachers, top class grammar school teachers, just espoused and talked and linked and leapt, and I just found it fascinating. I didn't do this thing called homework because
Right.
I lived in a new town filled with what I now term the East End diaspora. So,
Okay.
you know, from the slums of the Second World War, they went out and lived in new towns, Harlow,
Right.
Blackwood, and so I found there. I come from a French background, by the way,
Right.
so I found all English families weird. And so I
Yeah.
found English working class families weirder because I come from a very cultured background. Weird, but I loved it. So, and I
Yeah.
kind of loved the rough and ready, homely, warm smell. I still have a memory of the smell of those houses. Mixture of
Okay.
greens and potatoes still cooking too long, cigarette smoke, wet hair of dogs,
Yeah.
bath once a week, that kind of smell, which I found very homely. I found it so weird. It's nothing like my house smell, you know.
No.
And so I used to like their pursuits. My friends who went to the local secondary moderns, I love their semi-criminal and criminal pursuits. So I just
Right.
found that totally a wonderful balance, intellectual life in the day and
That's
shenanigans.
so funny. Like Lady
And
and the Tramp sort of thing.
sorry,
Like Lady and the Tramp.
a kind of yes. And then later I did athletics. I
That's
was
so
always a good runner,
funny.
one of the best in
Yeah.
the school. And then I was forced to do the 1 mile walk, race walk at the local sports, and I won it
Right.
by a mile. And there was a guy in our town who was an international. So I started doing race walking. I became national champion very quickly. I only did it in my teenage years, and I had a French passport, so I used to race for France. I was one of the best in the world for my age.
I mean, that's
And then
incredible.
I didn't train properly for the 72 Olympics that I really should have got there.
Right.
So, and my career plan was I was going to join the Paris police. I was going to do my national
Okay.
service 71, 72, and international athletes just did a week's military stuff, and then they're just professional athletes. And then I was going to go from there straight into the Paris police. But that never happened. And all of a sudden, I've got a career to do. So
Sure.
I just did the easiest thing possible, which was train to be a teacher. And I chose PE and French. PE was easy.
Nice.
French is my first language.
Yeah.
So I had 4 years of alternative education where
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we've got that in common because I was a PE teacher as well.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah,
the joke I usually tell is that to give you a sense of how lazy I was, I did a PE degree. I got a
yeah,
2-2, which we know is kind of
yeah.
borderline, but I didn't drink, play sport, or have a job. So I don't really know what I was doing. I had none of the normal distractions that would make someone get a 2-2. But yeah, that's funny. All right, well let's get back on track. So for those that are new to the podcast, the guests choose a kind of set of, I guess, elements that make up the flow of it, and the first one being something called a fast friends questions, which comes from some research about human connection, and the guests choose 3 questions that get kind of progressively more vulnerable as they go through the podcast. And the first one that Oliver chose was, given the choice of anyone dead or alive, who would you want as a dinner guest? So tell us about that.
Who did I choose?
Yeah,
I
I don't
can't.
know. You
Oh,
have
I
to
see.
think on the spot.
Okay, I would choose Werner Erhard.
Okay.
Werner Erhard was the creator of the S training. Um,
Right.
Several million people did it. It was
Really?
very controversial. In 1971 it started. I did it in 84. I did it in its last year before it became something else, the Landmark Forum. And
Right.
it was the most remarkable experience of my life. Completely and utterly turned me around. But there's no belief systems. It's not religious. I didn't come out with any belief system.
Right.
Um, he's an incredible guy. Several
What would
professors.
you ask? What would you ask him at dinner?
Oh, I'd ask him about the changing ways to address, excuse the language, ontological questions. which are deeper than psychology, who were
Right.
being in changing cultural times. So
Okay.
the S training was very, very confrontational. Dramatically, is the best show in town. It was designed to be so, given the circumstances of the post-hippie me generation, which had taken the wrong route by going through layers of the onion psychologically to find out who your real self was.
Right.
Because when you do that rigorously, you find, as David Hume, the Scottish Enlightenment philosopher, discovered in the 18th century, there's no one at home.
Right.
There's no one there, which is very closely aligned to Zen Buddhism. And then,
Right.
surprisingly, as I discovered, very close to Martin Heidegger's phenomenological studies. And in
Okay.
the 1930s, Heidegger had a whole series of conversations with Zen monk scholars where they talked about, and that's why poetry plays such a big part. And in a sense, it's a bit like Wittgenstein says, that which matters, you can't say it. So it's about hinting. So the Japanese have a culture of that where you want to talk about this. If you talk about it, you kill it dead. There's no more wondering. There's no more living in the question. You have an answer. Whereas when you
Right.
hint, you still live in the question. You're still exploring.
Yeah.
So I asked him
Interesting.
about that, and he has some views about the diminution of our human quality through addiction to screens.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Could you see any use of that within leadership training now? Any elements of that?
Well, his work was used in leadership training throughout the world. In the 1970s, Harvard Business Review says his was the most prominent ideas in business in the 1970s. And pretty much
Really?
everything you see on the internet to do with personal development and leadership is one tiny portion of what Werner Erhard's work did. That's why I'm kind of
Wow.
disappointed that people in leadership aren't interested in history of where the ideas come from.
Yeah.
So yes, what else? I want to say something else
Well,
about
that's
that.
great. I
Yeah,
mean, that
well,
and that already gives.
he introduced so many language. He introduced the first time the notion of sharing.
Okay.
Ordinarily, sharing was, I've got 6 Smarties. If I give you 3, I've got 3 left. Sharing means lessening what you've got. He introduced the idea of sharing, meaning self-disclosure, which
Okay.
is the opposite, it increases. He introduced the idea of alignment, which has been inaccurately used in school management to mean compliance. It was introduced in the 1970s to deal with 1950s and 60s command and control method, where everyone has to do the same thing. So human potential or creativity was locked in. Productivity could never get any more if you follow, factory styles of management, and so there's a danger I see in people using the word alignment, meaning we're all doing the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Alignment
Yeah. Yeah.
aims, but will employ different methods to get there because different ages, different subjects, or even as Tom Sherrington very validly says, but no one quite responds to it yet, depending on your personality. If you
Right.
have to give in, if you have to reduce, negate your sense of identity of who you are in order to do this job, we'll all teach like this, we're all like traffic wardens, we're all boom, then actually you're going to continue having no teachers. And
Yeah.
some people have to realize there's something that we're doing, and it's not just the kids. There's something that we're doing, and it isn't just workload, which means that teachers will feel they're less human in doing the job and they won't do it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that is a punchy start. Um, well, let's move on to this next thing. So, for those that are new to the podcast, we talk about something called an ignition point, and these are events or people or experiences from the guests' lives that have caused some sort of transformation. And Oliver's chosen, and I'll read it out as it is, and you can then tell us a bit more about it. Talking to world record holder Ron Clark in 1970. What happened there?
Well, first of all, when I was a French international, I had some friends with the American Olympic team who were
Right.
older, and they gave me some kit. So I had the Olympic kit. And before
Right, nice.
2 Olympic Games, when you had the Arab killing of Israelis,
Yeah.
security was so lax. I had an aunt in Edinburgh. The Commonwealth Games in 1970 were in Edinburgh. I went up to the gates with my American Olympic gear on and bag, spoke in what was an American stroke Canadian accent, and they let me in. And I knew Australian team. So I went to see them. I ended up in a bedroom, group of
No.
athletes, and I was sitting next to Ron Clark. Now, no one knows him now. He was in the 60s, he was probably the best known, most accomplished athlete in the world, multiple
Right.
world record holders. He broke the 5 and 10,000 meter records at a phenomenal amount, like a minute. It was unseen. Could never win a gold medal, but that was something else.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
we were talking about training and how it affects your life. And I remember him saying still, you know, I'm in Malmo, I'm on a European tour. There was Kipchoge Kaino, Michel Jazzy, and and I beat them and I broke the world record, and there were plaudits and champagne and photographers. I go back to the hotel room and I thought, oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that it? Success doesn't give you what you hope it will do. So running
Right.
faster than anybody in the world is only running faster than anybody in the world. Doesn't do anything else to you. Nowadays, it also means you get some money, but actually
Sure.
that means the crash is even harder. There's no meaning in it. It has no meaning. Life's events are meaningless. We just put meaning onto it, and
Yeah.
we kid ourselves they are inherent in the activity, in the event.
Right.
It's just whatever we project. It's back to the predictive machines, and his
Yeah.
level of disappointment. So he'll have another goal, and he'll then train for it. And kind of he'll have forgot the disappointment, the sense of emptiness, which of course is, I mean, very close to Buddhist philosophy.
Right.
Chasing something is empty. Everything is empty and meaningless, which sounds very heavy duty, but actually it frees you.
Yeah.
It frees you from that delusion.
Yeah. That is fascinating, isn't it? And that both the things we've talked about so far, almost again, they feel like they take your power away, but they almost give you power if you believe that you have the ability to sort of impact the world through your perceptions. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, I'd say so. Most of the things you see on the internet for leadership and self-development are variations of positive thinking.
Right.
And Werner Erhard very pithily defined positive thinking as cream on top of a turd,
Hilarious.
just pretending.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's a powerful
Some
metaphor.
of his dynamics is resistance causes persistence. If you
Okay.
resist the thought that you think you're crap or silly or stupid or worthless by talking sayings, I'm brilliant, the world is available to me, blah, 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 that's just on top of that. So the more you resist acknowledging your own view of yourself, the more it will persist.
Right.
Resistance equals persistence.
That is really interesting, isn't it? And again, I don't know. For me, the leadership training space has moved a bit further away from self management or the person and more towards the process and more kind of operational knowledge based stuff. Is that the sense you get?
In education,
Yeah, in education, yeah.
yeah, well, let me just talk away from it because I don't know much about educational. I don't think it's a bad thing, by the way. So
Right.
after Harvard Business Review said Werner Erhard's development of the notion of empowerment, by the way, the people who did his course were the movers and shakers of industry. So at one stage, the film Warner Brothers,
Yeah.
they were called Werner Brothers.
Oh,
All
really?
the, all the directors. I was in there with the editor of Vogue, the guy who started Herbalife. The movers and shakers then moved it. And later on, sometimes in the 80s, I read a book by I've got his name now. Getting older. It's about clarity and simplicity. He said the empowerment stuff's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but people love it, and then when it doesn't work absolutely like magic, they reject it.
Yeah.
It needs to balance up with tools. Empowerment
Brilliant.
without tools is always going to be limited. Tools without a sense of empowerment, having a system that allows you to use them in the ways that you see fit, will also be limited. So that's my
Yeah.
long roundabout answer about the shift from. The trouble is, I don't think. I'm going to try this out, and I may be embarrassed by my overstating it. I don't know. I've never met anyone in education who's done any work outside of education of any real depth that would qualify them to do any work on personal stuff.
Right.
They just read stuff in books and know
Yeah.
the terminology. So I don't know anyone who's ever talked to me. They may have done. I don't know anyone who's ever talked to me where their surface ego, who I am, their identity has been ripped apart. They've felt it's terrible. They've come and seen that they've got all these little rackets going on in their life to survive. Either it's a racket, might be being nice. Everyone has to like me. They're being nice, or I've got to be a bastard. That way they respect me. Whatever it is, there's a racket and there's a cost. Unless they've gone into that, and at the end of which they've gone way past their comfort zones where they would want to see, they'll see they're just empty, meaningless. Give them an opportunity to then create from afresh. Otherwise, what happens to Werner Erhard's dynamic that I've seen all the time is that the part, we think of the future in front and the past behind.
Sure.
That's why he talked about we crash in life because we steer with the rear view mirror.
Right.
We're just looking what's ahead of us. We think we relate to what we know in the past, which is the problem of adopting completely the idea of how we think cognition works by bringing everything down from our schema, prior learning. So in life, in addition to people's bodies getting stiffer and stiffer and weaker, our minds get stuck in a groove. They get weaker and weaker, and there's no juice in it. So Edward de Bono, who is unfairly mocked in education through people's ignorance of his work, just total ignorance. I don't know why they're embarrassed by their ignorance. It's they who picked up adult techniques and applied them to children. So it's themselves they ought to mock. That's this wonderful metaphor, which neuroscience is backing up. Imagine a plate of virgin jelly, and you pour some hot water, some a bit, because it's the density isn't the same, and there's the power, the impact of the water. You gradually start to have some indentations. And the more water you pour in, the deeper the indentations. So when we're growing up, we have our experience creates these indentations. And so we do nothing more than reinforce who we are.
Right.
And much of the work you hear, totally inaccurate use of the word transformation. Transformation was another word introduced by Werner Erhard, which is an instantaneous reorientation of who you are in the world and what you know. Right. You don't know more, you know what you know in another way. And I'll talk about transformation if you want to later on.
Wow. Well, let's keep moving on.
I don't know anyone who's actually had those experiences, so I don't know. They've got some GCSE level of psychology and personal development.
Yeah.
You have to do something. He makes this distinction in the stand or on the court. For I've seen nearly all the psychology that people talk about with leadership is accrued from reading, which is in the stand. Not against reading, not against academic work and being in the stand. You get a perspective, but it is absolutely not the same thing as being on the court.
Yeah, wow. Again, more powerful stuff. Well, let's move on to the first launch pad, which I have to admit to a little bit of nervousness because I don't think I've met somebody who's as well read as yourself. And so I'm going to be exposed as a superficial person here, but maybe you can add some extra kind of knowledge to me. But I'll share the first, for those that are watching on the video, the first launch pad that Oliver chose was the ladder of inference. And again, I have to admit to a large level of ignorance up until about probably 4 years ago. I didn't even know this thing existed, potentially because of the isolation of education. But since then, I've been using it to try and add some rigor and some structure to the way that I make kind of decisions. And for those that are unfamiliar, I'll run through the launch pad a little bit, and then we'll ask Oliver why it resonates with him, and maybe he can add a bit more kind of stuff to it. So again, if you're new to this, there's this idea of kind of moving through the steps of the ladder can, enhance our decision making. And as you can imagine, the ladder of inference suggests, from my understanding, that you get closer to better inference the higher up you go from the ladder. And it starts with this idea that there's an observable pool of data. So there's all kinds of things that we could collect and we could see, we could hear, we could, experience. And then there are a set of questions that might be useful for leaders to ask ahead of a project as well as post-project. And the first one they talk about is the first step being observing. And potentially there's questions for leaders around what should I observe? So what information should I take from the environment? And then, of course, at the end, you're asking, did I observe the right data? The next step up would be selecting. So then once you've decided, you are then selecting that information, hopefully selecting the most reliable and valid of that. And again, post-project, you're evaluating your selection. You then get to the kind of interpretation. So you've selected the data, you've collected it, and then you're trying to look for meaning. The opposite would be whether or not your inferences you made were accurate. Then it steps up to the assuming, which for me is probably the most dangerous step, and where I have to be really conscious of my own cognitive biases and past experiences, I suppose, to use looking in the rearview mirror a little bit. But what assumptions am I making from the data? And then, of course, what assumptions did I make if you're using this afterwards? That would naturally lead to you making some sort of summary, some sort of conclusions. And then it moves up into almost back to being a bit deeper, really. What do I now believe, or how have my beliefs affected my assumptions and my conclusions? I had to admit to one recently in an MPQSL session where I uncovered this belief that boys are more badly behaved than girls, and that has purely come from experience. But when I look a bit deeper, it did have an impact on the assumptions I were making and the conclusions I would make. If I arrived at a classroom and there was noise or kind of bad behaviour, my beliefs pushed me to think it was the boys, and so I had to keep kind of referencing that. At that point, there's maybe a suggestion that we come back down the ladder, and again, I'll be interested to know whether Oliver believes this kind of up and down movement. And then, of course, the last bit in any of these decision-making processes would be, okay, well, what am I going to do about it? What's the next best step? So that's my kind of superficial understanding of this, Oliver. But what did it resonate with you, and what can you add to it?
That was great, by the way. Chris Argyris and Peter Senju were close friends of Werner Erhard. And if you look at E. Brock's PhD book, 500 Pages, A History of Coaching, you'll see that Werner Erhard is one of the originators of modern coaching. And he was in the nexus of so many people.
He is the guy.
All the people who started the first coaching courses in the 80s, and I was volunteering in his organisation in the 80s, so I saw the first life coaching, executive coaching, all came from a model that Werner Erhard has, which is simpler than this.
Right.
The problem with this model is that, and it works really well. It's an academic's analysis of it, but our thoughts don't go in those steps. They go in one.
Right.
Right. So he has, I'm going to have to gesture. He has a circle. He has a circle called What Happened.
Right.
And he has another circle called What I Made It Mean, or narrative.
Oh,
or
nice.
Added to it. And with his intense way of talking to people, he finds out that so few people have that distinction, what happened and what I made it mean. They have what he calls a collapsed circle. They have, in reality, they may say so in an essay, but in terms of their life, there's absolutely no difference between what happened and my interpretation. Right. So I know he's a bastard. I know it's unfair. I know it's bullying. But actually, if you, for a minute, you take on a behavioural lens, there's no such thing as bullying. Show me bullying. So where does
Yeah.
bullying live? So I'm going to turn the tables on you slightly and ask you a question. Where does bullying live?
Yeah, well, this is fascinating. I mean, I kind of can't forget what you just said. I mean,
And
my reaction before you said that would be in the bullied head, in the bullied
I'll come
perception.
back to the answer. So what happens was you have a meaning that you attach from what happened, and it reinforces your belief, and then you predict and you look out for it in the fact. So in the end, the two circles are collapsed. So where
Yes.
does bullying live? Bullying lives in your mouth.
Right.
Bullying lives in your language, in your description. That those actions, those words, the way they were said, where they were said, and all that, all the physical descriptions you call bullying, which is a
Right.
valid meaning making, but it lives in your mouth. So,
Yeah.
so that then leads to an analysis of, as he says, there is no is. So there is
No.
no bullying. You can't take a camera and see bullying. You can see someone hit somebody. You
Right.
can see someone swear at somebody. The bullying lives in our description of it. And until we separate that, we don't really have a lot of power.
No.
So the ladder of inference, because I know he and Erhard would have worked together, is an academic cognitive task analysis. The trouble with cognitive task analysis is the way we draw them, they infer a linear route and you go through each one and you don't.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Love that.
So if
Well,
I had
that.
time working with you, any problem you've had, the first
Yeah.
thing to do is to distinguish what happened with what you made
Yes.
it in.
Well,
Until
that
you do
is.
that, you've no power.
Yeah.
You're in a
That's
collapse.
already a great takeaway, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that idea, that phrase, what you made it mean. That
Yes.
adds, there's a sort of intentionality behind that.
No, no, there isn't. That's the trouble. There's automaticity based on
Ah,
your
right.
past, based on your schema. You don't
Oh,
even
okay.
you project the past so far into the future, so
Yeah.
quickly, it's there. All you're seeing is your prejudices. And that's why when I
Right.
on Twitter and I see, it tends to be secondary male people who tweet, oh, cognitive biases, look at this. No, 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 no. I haven't had one occasion when one of those people who discovered, yet again, those list of cognitive biases discloses one of them that they had.
Right.
I used to be a complete and utter idiot, a prat, because I thought this. But actually, when I look back, I was entirely at fault. I was projecting this
Yeah.
belief. None of them. And you know what they use them for? They use them to beat other people in arguments. They accuse people of
Right.
being biased. It's so
Yeah.
sad. They are
Wow.
nowhere near using. So when they talk about knowledge being power, well, it's not power for the good. It's
No,
power
not helpful, Pat. Yeah.
just to the survival of their identity as they berate other people and mock them on internet dialogue.
Wow. This is fascinating. Well, let's move on to your second fast friends question. So this one says, if a crystal ball could tell you the truth about yourself, your life, the future, or anything else, what would you want to know?
I have trouble with this one because I've never ever spent time considering, because in addition to those separated two circles, there is a third circle. And we're going to touch a bit on Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy. So he says, when I say I'm going to be a ballet dancer, when I have what ballet dancers have, the kit, the coach, the subscription, then I'll do what ballet dancers do. I'll practice and train. Then if I'm good enough, I'll be able to be a ballet dancer.
Right.
How we go through life. When Erhard turns it the other way. First job is to be a ballet dancer. So you don't project from the past. From
Right.
your speaking, you declare, which makes you this is the real sense of the word vulnerable. People have started to explore it, but they haven't got its essential nature. The essential nature is where you can really invalidate, others can invalidate you, is you declare, I'm going to be a ballet dancer. I am a ballet dancer. Then I'll do the things ballet dancers do, and then I'll have the things ballet dancers have. Satisfaction,
Right.
acclaim, solo parts, etc. And the thing is, when you declare something in the future, and you don't have any agreement, people will invalidate you. So all we do in life is, especially if we have an upset, we go to our friends, not for any logical, objective analysis. We just want them to agree with our story.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
agree with our story, we feel the story is true, that is
Yeah.
what happened, and our friends get stronger. So
Yeah.
friends just agree with each other's stories.
And that's that. The jelly mold gets deeper and deeper. Is that right?
Well, yes, indeed, yes. Yep, yep.
Yeah. Fascinating. So, is there anything you'd like to know about the future?
No, no,
Just
doesn't
leave it
interest.
as it is.
Yeah, yeah,
It's probably safer as well, isn't it? Um, yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, let's move on to your second ignition point, because this is equally as well. Yeah, interesting as the other one. So you wrote down participation in the EST training in 1984. What
yeah.
was that?
That was one of Erhard's work. Is EST stand for Erhard Seminars Training, or
Right.
S as in Latin to be.
Right.
So I did it because a friend of mine did it. I had a friend in the London Buddhist Centre, so that gave me some trust. I grew up deeply in the hippie era. He
Right.
trusted me. He said, Oliver, it's going to sound weird. You're going to go to a big hotel ballroom. There'll be loads of seats, immaculately put chandelier, and this slick American guy or woman at the front who's like too slick, too aggressive, too confrontational. You've got giving some incredible promises, you know. Anyway, I went there, and it was sensational.
Was it?
I didn't have much money then. You know, I ended up paying £250 with a check. My wife said,
Wow.
"What have you done? We don't have the money. Have you joined a cult?" And I did this. I did the course 2 weekends, very long. My mother did she was a 60-year-old teacher. She did the following one, just in case check I wasn't joining a cult. And so this started at 9 o'clock in the morning and will often go on to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And you had homework and you had to be on time. Absolutely no one was allowed to go in the room unless they were on time. So
Okay.
sticking with rules was the first lesson. Anyway, I came out. I invited 17 of my friends from different areas of my life where unconsciously I'd always put them into separate sections.
Right.
And I had an incredible embarrassing moment if they happened to all meet together. Yeah, I'd orchestrated it. And what I found, I used to run to school and back, about 5 or 6 miles. So in the morning, you're stiff. I used to run at, say, 7:30-minute miling. I checked myself. The next day, with only 2 or 3 hours sleep, I did the first 2 miles at sub 5-minute miling.
Really?
Doing races, but not with a tracksuit and my sandwich and a bum bag.
Yeah.
And for the next couple of years, I only slept about 4 or 5 hours a night. I just woke up. So much energy. And to tell you the truth, in the special school where I worked, I used to leave soon after the buses, sort of 3:45. All of a sudden, without thinking, I had the caretaker saying, "Oliver, we've got to go now. It's 7:30."
Yeah.
I just engrossed with projects and commitments, and seeing commitments as a liberating force rather than something that brings you to, "Oh no, God, I've committed to do that. I've got to do it by so and so." Completely and utterly transformed me. I didn't know anything more. I just switched how I knew what I knew. That's the meaning of transformation. Anything else is change. And the education, it's kind of the slow learners, because all the leading lights used it in business. For example, Reebok used it. They quadrupled their share value because of productivity after the whole company did it.
Right.
And yet what? I lost the point I was going to make. Sorry, that's just getting older.
Reebok.
Yeah, so they did that. I didn't have any new knowledge. I just used it. Sorry. So I want to talk about so business people used it first and used it in their businesses, and incredible stories of the improvement. And education has always been a slow learner. I don't know why. Maybe there's too much workload. They don't go out and try anything. I'm so surprised how conservative teachers and leaders are. They haven't tried anything beyond this little narrow thing called educational management, educational courses.
Yeah.
So by the time they get it, if you want to use the word lethal mutation, It just, or they think it's a really sexy word, transformation, but no idea that it means sudden. What they're talking about is change, incremental
Of
change.
course.
It's not so sexy, is it?
No, it's not.
What you
No,
mean is
that's
compliance, but no one likes compliance, so they'll misuse the word
no.
alignment. So I
So
see that. I see that.
I was going to say, would we find it? Is it called EST still? Does it exist in any other form?
We retired it in 1985 and replaced
Right.
it with the Landmark Forum, where, given the confrontational methods of the S training, because it was in the hippie era where they were letting it flow, man, and just needed to.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes the S training was called military training for the hippies.
Was it?
Yeah. Then the Landmark Forum was a lot more sedate and in tune with our culture, and that's still going
Yeah.
now. The Landmark Forum,
Okay.
the same
Well, let's
distinction.
have. Yeah, we'll have to look out for
You'll
that then.
find the collapse circle, and people will talk about how it happens in their life. Listen, when I did the S training, I had a nun who'd had a religious experience when she was 19, completely blew her away.
Right.
And then she was about 35 or 50 even. She had to admit that most of the years since that religious experience was a lie. She was living in the memory of the experience, not in the experience. There's a world of difference between living in the concept and living in the experience. And so I heard people stand up who've been in the Holocaust. So I'm talking about, I mean, you couldn't get more profound, serious items. Yet you also had people stand up saying, oh, my husband gets on my nerves because he doesn't pull the seat up or whatever. So, and it doesn't matter how significant, seemingly insignificant or significant, the same dynamics are at play. And when you're in the
Yeah.
audience, first of all, you see there are 250 people. When people stand up, start sharing about their life, your mind just goes, oh, the idiot,
Yeah. Of course it
they're
does.
not knowledgeable. And all of a sudden you get, bam, God, they're all me.
Yeah.
They're all me. I'm
I
no better,
love it.
superior. I'm as caught up in the delusions and the costs that come with them as any and all of the people that stood up prior to that.
Yeah.
And you can't be
God,
told. You can't be told that.
you have to discover it. Yeah. Jeez. Wow. Well, let's keep moving. Wow, this is amazing. Let's move on to your second launchpad. So for this one, again, I'll share my screen for those that are following along on the video. Here we go. Oliver chose what they called the power of a pre-mortem. And again, similar to lots of the launchpad things, these are not in my consciousness or awareness, and they become in there. And then the method of me learning about them in kind of, understanding them is to synthesize a load of kind of research into an image. And so if you're in that situation where you haven't heard this phrase before, the idea being that, sometimes we need to start in a dark place in order to find the light. It's a very cliche, isn't it? But actually, the point is that if you can imagine the failure of a project, you can work backwards from that and potentially kind of save it. And so I was fascinated to read, that there is there's a process which I'm sure is a bit like our previous launchpad in that there is derivatives of this, but essentially this idea that if you wanted to perform a pre-mortem, the idea would be that you kind of set the scene and that you get all the relevant stakeholders involved. You articulate the aim of the pre-mortem and the process. So why are we doing this? How will it work? And then most importantly, I suppose, creating a level of psychological safety where people feel happy to be vulnerable, feel happy to challenge, feel happy to admit, I guess, assumptions and poor beliefs and stuff. So once you've set the scene, the suggestion is that you then imagine the failure. So you say, right, this project we're thinking of launching, let's pretend that it's been a catastrophic failure. Let's describe that failure in as much detail as possible, be as creative as possible. And so then you get, hopefully, a variety of perspectives about what sort of things could go wrong. And then you go through a process of trying to kind of prioritize those failures in terms of a threat level to get some sort of, I guess, hierarchy. And then, of course, you then move on to sort of saying, well, hang on a minute, let's have a look at if that's what we think could go wrong. Let's backtrack. Let's go upstream, I suppose, to find what contributing factors might have led to those failures. Then there's a potential, some usefulness in trying to find some patterns or themes within those contributing factors, because they might all, they might come back to a single root one, but also at that stage challenging any kind of assumptions that you may have made. And then it talks about the next step being, gone too far, I suppose, looking for solutions, so mitigations. Okay, so we've imagined the failure, we've found some potentially contributing factors. What could we do to mitigate that? And things like time, finance, people, and those sorts of things. But also starting to be a bit more operational, a bit more, I guess, action based by deciding, okay, well, who's going to be responsible, who's going to be involved. With the final thing being a bit like anything to do with implementation, making sure that you have consolidated any learning that happened from the pre-mortem. So protecting time to sort of, I guess, get the key takeaways and to summarize and to sort of clarify, and then communicating out to stakeholders before making sure that if the project does go ahead, you are still continuing to monitor it. So again, that was my kind of initial intro into that. But why did it resonate with you, Oliver, and what do you know more about it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to give my spin on it, which is a lot simpler. So I have the same as I had with the ladder of inference. None of it is inaccurate, but you can't keep it in your head. I've got
exactly.
I have a diminishing working memory as I get older, and I had COVID once. So so here's what I remember. I used to travel around the country for 20 years doing training. So before and I had, so the best directions I had was someone said, third on the left, then the right. When you see the school, take the other left. And when you get to the church, that means you've gone too far.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to sink that in because that's not normal to say that. If you see the church, you've gone too far.
Right.
So that means you're building into the direction what could go wrong.
Yeah, of course.
So that's your way of describing it is a theory of action.
Right.
And the mechanism by which we use really are mental models. Although some people are discounting it, we've had enormous success, both Adam and Sarah and the walkthrough team, is making a distinction. By the way, what I'm about to say is not true because schemas don't live. They're like leprechauns. Right? Schema is what you know.
Yeah.
Propositional, conceptual, abstract, generalizable, non-linear, nested knowledge, etc., etc. I could go into great detail. A mental model, although some psychologists call them action schema, I think that confuses. Mental models, by contrast, are the mini theories you have about how life works.
Right.
So Roger Schank wrote a fabulous book where it was riddled with his examples of going into a restaurant. These mini scripts became mental models. So what you've just been describing is a way in which we can surface our mental models.
Yeah.
And we can then do is the opposite. Judea Pearl, in his analysis of causality, said that counterfactuals are the highest form of reasoning. What would have happened? Well, you can put it into the future. What might happen? So what are the potential pitfalls? Now, of course, because everyone's so enthusiastic, and particularly if I'm the deputy head or I'm not right up at the top and the head teacher's saying, we're going to do this, he or she really wouldn't like it if I'd say, yeah, but tell me 3 things that could go wrong with it. I could say 4 away. Why aren't you telling us? Then actually, no one goes with his head teachers. He's just trying to sell something. And if everyone's quiet, he goes, great, I sold it. You never want to sell anything. You never want to sell anything because they're just prisoners. They just go, yeah, yes, boss, I want to go home. So they need to see it themselves. So given the territory, this is what we know, our schema, but this are mental models where we're going to put it all into action. Blimey, there's a pitfall there. Because actually, what you said was the third on left was actually it's someone's driveway. So the third on left is actually further down. So you're looking at all the pitfalls, which are your mental models. And then you have a sense that it's our thinking. I just want to add to this as well, that it isn't an inherent part, but in practice it's really useful. It's something that I picked up from another American called 3-point communication. So if you're the head teacher and I'm pointing out the pitfalls, You're very developed. You won't say anything wrong. You'll be polite. You'll have in your mind safe space. Validate what he's saying. Reword what you're saying, and you'll nod as you're doing now. Yes, Oliver, I really appreciate you pointing out the possibilities where it could go wrong. The team have looked
Yeah,
at this, and you just shut me down because my opinion is against yours.
of course.
I'm here, and my opinions are like arrows firing to your face. They attack your identity. They attack your ideas because this is what's called two-point communication, face to face. Now, I learned this in 2008 when I was the only educator in a 3-day course in Berlin that involved people who set up Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Like the brains. And what they do, I came away with a phrase saying the wall is the new desk. One,
Okay.
get up off your arse and stand and get more oxygen flowing.
Yeah.
Because if your body is sat and stayed, so will your ideas be. You'll be defending. This chair's my castle, and I'll rebuff everybody's ideas politely because I've read all the management books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're both standing up and the wall is our shared visuospatial sketchpad where we think it's our mind, then when we move post-it notes around, they're our ideas.
Yeah.
So if I say, yes, Chris, that's right, but look, I've got this idea that if that happens, this is actually, from my experience, this is quite often a pitfall. You don't take that as an attack on your thinking.
I love that.
You're going. So they call that 3-point communication. There's you and me, two, and the third point, it has to be a visual, is our shared mind. Completely different. Looking at that as our thinking, our mind, our understanding, our plans, our commitment to you say, I object.
That is so fascinating.
Politely, I'll object very politely. I'd say things like, oh, Chris, I hope you don't mind, and I'm a little humble old me, and what do I know? And I have 3 schools like you have, and they're all outstanding, and no. I'll put myself down, and then I'll say, but, because there's always a but.
Of course.
And you say, I really appreciate that. I've read the literature, and I believe safe space contributing. No. But then you'll say, but.
Yeah.
And when you listen carefully, you can hear all the surface stuff.
You can, yeah. The thing that's sticking in my mind from that is that idea of, I hadn't thought about it before, that simply sitting opposite someone with them presenting something and me presenting something different signals a kind of competitive.
Well, let me give you a strange interpretation of the word confront. It's a bit like the House of Parliament. You have the two sides. They sit opposite each other.
Right.
They confront each other. They're their front. Yeah. So two fronts opposite each other. that's duels, that's charging, that's boxing, that's whatever it is. By the side. By the way, Silicon Valley was built on post-it notes in that way.
Right.
Apple built on post-it notes in that way, and it still is.
Well, and it also struck me that if I'm stood up looking at a board with someone, we're working side by side.
Exactly. So all those metaphors, side by side, you're my partner.
Yeah. This is our space. We're creating this one thing together.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great takeaway for people. I'm sure me and you should go into, selling, I don't know, boards or some post-it boards. Anyway, let's move on to this bit, which you said that you might have a few of these, which I can't imagine. But the last Fast Friends question that Oliver chose was, what embarrassing moment in your life comes quickest to mind? So what you got there?
Well, one of the things that happened after I did the S training, and I did a lot of further work, seminar work, was that whatever amount of a fool you think you are when you mess up, you are 10 times bigger fool by not trying it.
Nice.
Because life happens and it's all over. No second chance, it's all over. You can believe in reincarnation or heaven or whatever. That's just a delusion. It's all over. You just get the one chance. So do it. Yeah. So out of interest, I also studied rational emotive therapy by Albert Ellis, which was almost completely stolen by the cognitive behavior therapists.
Yeah.
Completely stolen. And one of the leading British rational motive therapists was called Windy Dryden. He was
Okay.
called Windy because one of the homeworks, and I led a course in rational motive therapy at Cambridge, and one of the homeworks is to construct a very, very embarrassing moment and just notice what happens. So, for example,
Yeah.
some people will go into a hardware store with a big fedora and a chiffon scarf and asks and say, "Oh, my good man, could you please find me? Do you have a duster with you? You know, oh my God, you wouldn't do that."
I
So I
know.
did some exercise in the course that I led. I did some exercises that people, I mean, they trusted me. They went and did these horrifically embarrassing exercises, which I could give you later on.
Yeah.
Anything embarrassing, and then just notice what happened. And what you have is, I shouldn't be embarrassed. I shouldn't be made a fool. Um, it mustn't happen to me. And Albert Ellis was a bit of a one. He said, "The thing we need to cure about you is your masturbation."
Okay.
Using must all the time, so he put it on the par with masturbation.
Masturbation. I love that.
He was a really wonderful guy.
That's
Rational
interesting, isn't
motive.
it? And I guess that is some of the thinking about that embarrassment that if you take it to the furthest extreme, you've then got quite a large barrier for embarrassment.
Well, it relates to this. This may be a bit of a jump. When you're in the embarrassing moment, you think you're thinking, "Oh, this is terrible. I'll never do it again." And you think you're thinking that.
Yeah.
So I talk like Werner Erhard does. You're not thinking it at all. It thinks you.
Okay.
You have a thought. So his analogy is, when you go out and it rains, you personally get wet. Yeah?
Yeah.
But it's not personal. It's not personal. Rain doesn't personally go for you. So we go through life and there are circumstances, and we're born into being human. We
Yeah.
don't create being human. We're born into being human. And we're born into a particular type of human, given our family and our culture and our background.
Yeah.
And we're just a stimulus response machine and if we resist that idea, people, "Oh, I see why advertising works for everybody. Not for me. I'm too clever. I'm too
Yeah.
independent." Yeah, nonsense. Such utter bollocks. Delusional. When you see the degree to which you are conditioned by the humanity which was there already, you have an opportunity to create something afresh. You
Yeah.
can't create
Wow.
in opposition to something, because that just reinforces it.
Yeah.
Distance equals persistence.
Jeez.
So if I hate embarrassing moments and I avoid them, what's underneath all the time is the pressure of being embarrassed. So it comes
Exactly.
along with me. It's like a bit of snot. You just cannot get rid of it.
No. That's
So that's kind of what I
unbelievable.
wanted to say, rather than just saying this episode embarrassed, which is moderately interesting. How comes? What happens? What's the significance? So embarrassing moments and the thoughts you have are just humanity working. And just then you don't have to attach yourself. In the
No.
same way that you don't attach yourself to the burps and the farts, I have a thought. It's not this cherished thing I'm thinking. You just have this
Yeah.
thought, automatic, and it thinks you. If you then respond to the thought like it's your thought, and then you start this whole series of machinations in order to
Yeah. Yeah.
to avoid, none of that is you authentically responsible. You're just a machine that responding to the invariable reaction you have to a situation.
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, I think two things are gonna have to happen. I'm gonna have a lie down after this to try and make sense of some of it. But also, we're gonna have to have an episode two, Nick. We'll have to have a yearly podcast episode because I need some more Oliver Cav time for
Well, if
sure.
you want to study
Um,
it, if you, excuse me, read a book called Speaking Being.
right,
It analyzes the dialogues in the Landmark Forum with a
right,
professor Heidegger, interpreting Werner American terminology and street level interactions with
Yeah.
Heidegger's all-encompassing distinctions.
Wow. Well, I'll get on to that then.
She's the copy.
How can people connect with you or your work?
Well, I am Oli Cav, and I have a website called olicav.com that I
Yeah.
haven't done anything for about 3 years now, but you can download loads of stuff. My main
Yeah.
job has been with Tom Sherrington and Matt Stone
wow.
with the teaching walkthroughs, for which we
Yeah.
just did the coaching walkthroughs, and we've now got an exciting period where we're getting teaching walkthroughs, coaching walkthroughs, and learning walkthroughs, and looking to see to
Ooh.
really integrate them in a modular fashion so bits can
Yeah.
fit in anywhere. This is where you have collected professional wisdom and evidence-informed strategies from the point of view of the teacher, from the point of view of the coach, from the point of view of the student. Now,
Right.
let's see how they interact and work together as a selected units for the very specific problem or situation that you're kind of addressing.
Yeah, wow, that sounds amazing. Brilliant. Wow. Thank you ever so much for your time. And thanks to everyone who's listening. As you said, connect with Oliver on the socials or interact with the kind of walkthrough stuff. And if you're interested in any of the Launchpad stuff, then get in touch with me on LinkedIn. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you. Great to speak to you, Chris.